You're listening to the afternoon session on Binjang 91.5 of Tech Talk with Mathew Dickerson. G'day, Matthew.
Yeah, good afternoon, Tony.
Now, Google has revealed how much of the world it's mapped with Street View and Earth. That's interesting, isn't it?
10 million miles, Tony. 10 million miles of Street View has been mapped around the Earth. They talk about 98% of the areas where people live has now been mapped by Street View, which just seems an incredible amount. And it often amazes me when I am looking for various things. For example, we're organising a charity bike ride a few months ago, and just some of the areas we're going were fairly remote. And it still amazed me how much of that was actually mapped. And those areas you thought, there's no way this would be mapped, but they're mapped. So they've been very busy out there, cars driving the streets. Many people have seen those cars, the Google Streetview cars going along, taking photos as it drives along. So it's quite incredible. Now, Apple's trying to catch up. Apple's a long way behind. Apple's trying to introduce photos in their mapping software. iOS 13 introduced a lot of that, but again, they've got 10 million miles to catch up. So Google's certainly a long way out there.
Well, I just love it when I go overseas and I can get Street View happening back here in Australia first and get familiar with things before I go.
Yeah. Why bother? Don't worry about wasting your money on the plane fare. Just have a look at Street View when you've been there, Tony.
Can't go inside the houses, though, Matthew.
No, true. They haven't gone that far, but give it time, Tony.
Yes,
give it time.
Yes. That's very true.
Yes, it's fascinating how much they've done. Yeah.
Now, Amazon is delivering half its own packages as it becomes a serious rival to FedEx and UPS.
Well, that is interesting, isn't it? Amazon obviously never started off being a logistics company. It wanted to do online sales, and it relied on other companies, the FedExes, the UPSs of the world, to actually deliver those parcels. They actually got to the point where they found it was better for them to start to build their own logistics. So they're building their own processes with their trucks and aeroplanes and a whole range of... So they're basically going end to end. And the fact that they're now delivering half of all their own parcels, that's a huge volume. Amazon obviously ships out a huge amount of parcels in a given year. But they're at the point now where in a year they will ship about 2.5 billion packages, billion, not million, billion packages in a year. Now, when you compare that to FedEx and UPS, they're at 3 billion and 4.7 billion respectively. So just in their own shipments, they've already caught up to FedEx. That gives you an idea of just how big Amazon is.
That's really massive, isn't it?
It's unbelievable.
Well, now moving on to the next topic. The first all-electric plane has flown for just about 15 minutes.
And then there have been some other experimental planes as well, but this one was interesting in the fact that there is a commuter company that's actually going through a process of getting some planes registered, ready to actually start flying passengers. Now, they took an old 1957 de Havilland DHC-2, which is an old workhorse, a very reliable plane, and they converted that from obviously kerosene or petrol to electric, and essentially they filled up where the petrol tanks would be with lithium-ion batteries. Now, they've only got about 15 minutes out of that, and that's just a prototype to work with. What they're aiming towards is they want to be able to get to the point where they can do some of the 100-mile or thereabouts commutes, and this particular charter company does a lot of those short-haul trips, and that's where electric will be fantastic. Again, it's very efficient for those short-haul trips. It'll be obviously a quieter flight, it'll be better for the environment, it'll be a lot cheaper, incredibly cheap to run when you look at those short-haul flights. They still say that they're about maybe 2 years away from using it in a commercial situation, but the fact that they're flying those flights already, albeit 15 minutes, but they're flying those flights already, I think we'll see those sort of short-haul flights coming around before too long. And I think when you look at 100 miles, and this is air miles, so obviously when you're driving on the road, you're travelling a lot more distance, but when you look at something like, for example, Dubbo to Sydney, I don't think we're that far away, maybe 5 years before we get to the point where we see Dubbo to Sydney flights being serviced by someone that uses electric planes.
Well, you wouldn't believe that, would you?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. It really is.
Wait to see if my prediction's true first before we believe it.
Well, we'll see. Might have to use a little bit of wind drift to help it along, perhaps.
That's right, only do it when there's a tailwind.
Now, the next topic is a self-driving freight truck just drove across the country to deliver butter. This was in the United States, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It drove from California to Pennsylvania, self-driving all the way. The only time that the driver, they had to have a driver in there because they couldn't go completely driverless yet. The only time the driver had to stop was actually when it was mandated for a driver to have to stop, in other words, for a rest period. So even though the truck was driving and he could have been sitting back having a sleep, he had to basically stop it then when they had to have his rest period still.
Yeah.
And so it took 41 hours to get across the country, which is a normal time frame that would take to do that particular trip with those rest stops.
Yeah.
So the truck drove the whole way, the driver took over at the rest stop and it's refueling.
Yep.
But it's a pretty big step in the right direction for driverless. And the company that's been working on that particular one said that they thought it was better to actually work on trucks because they spend so much time on the major interstates, the freeways, the highways, rather than a car where the Apples and the Googles and the Teslas are working on those, is getting around city traffic. Much more complicated than driving out on the highway. So again, there's a lot of people working on this solution and people poo-pooed a little bit, but again, I don't think we're that far down the track before we'll see driverless vehicles, completely autonomous vehicles happening all over the place.
I think you'd be a game man to say that's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. Interesting, with cryptocurrency, investors want the body of the defunct company founder exhumed to make sure he's dead. Now, this is one of the many cryptocurrency investors, company founders, I might add.
Yeah, that's right. And it does sound a little bit morbid, but Gerald Cotton was 30 years of age. He had approximately $200 million in Australian dollars of cryptocurrency in his wallet that only he knew the password of. I mean, you'd think that you'd probably put that information in your will maybe. You might want your spouse or family to actually have access to that. Understandably, the spouse in this situation isn't very happy, not very impressed that people are asking for her husband's body to be exhumed. That may be emotional. It also may be the fact that she got access to the $200 million. So we don't know the full extent of that. But this is one of the issues with cryptocurrency, that it is made to be very secure. And if you don't have the key, then it's very secure. So you can't actually get access to it. So you could leave that money to someone in your will. If you don't give them the key in your will, then it's absolutely useless. So some of the investors in this particular cryptocurrency, who have lost obviously the $200 million, are concerned that he actually hasn't passed away. He's just pretended to die, faked his own death, and he's still living at large with their $200 million.
Puts a new definition on taking it all with you, doesn't it, Matthew?
It does, yes. They say you can't take it all with you. Maybe he has.
Well, he has by the looks of it.
That's right.
And you've been listening to Tech Talk on Binjang 91.5 with Mathew Dickerson. Thank you, Matthew.
My pleasure. Only one more Tech Talk before Christmas, Tony.
That's it. And it's back to the program now on Binjang 91.5.